show starts in 1 minute. Good evening, folks, and a hearty welcome to our drive-in theater. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you, one that will provide several hours of pleasurable relaxation and diversion for you and your family.
Like 9 out of 10 film stars, Raquel Welch uses Lux Beauty Soap.
Well, no, I like to be a woman and a man to be a man, you know.
We hope you'll make this a weekly visit. You love the tasty array of snacks we have to offer. Bring your friends. There are always wonderful new pictures to see. We hope you have a wonderful time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse. This week, well, it's been very tiresome to be online this week. Dissident Nomad, you're joining me this week to talk about the current thing.
Hi, Walrus. Yeah, good to be on. And yeah, it's that time of the day, stroke week, stroke month where we the current thing has changed, and you know we've got to move with the times.
It's been a couple of months now. We have to insert some new software updates, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, new software updates indeed.
This one is very strange, though. I mean, it's been a wild week and a half on Twitter, seeing all the takes coming out, seeing the various 4D chess plays being played out, and all that. But in the end, as I said to you just before the show started, it's just getting a bit tiresome, and I said maybe it's because I'm a bit younger than others, that I haven't lived long enough to see this go on and on and on. But I feel like we're just sort of fighting the same battles all over again. Like we're dunking on journalists. We're pointing out that Jews are hypocrites. Jewish commentators, right? Like Ben Shapiro, right? Specifically, and it's it's nothing new. It's nothing that actually builds anything. It's just feeding sort of the content machine, I feel.
Yeah, I totally agree. Again, just for a frame of reference, I'm a sort of early millennial. So, I can remember previous escalations in tensions between these two groups. But I think the difference is just how technology has accelerated and how the 24-hour news cycle has as well. So it's the way things are playing out on social media. It kind of sort of, intensifies all the emotions and all the events around this. So, yeah, I think that's one of the big aspects we'll get into during the stream. But
and that's why I thought, I was originally thinking that we weren't sort of, the nature of our show is a bit more, I'm not going to say timeless, but we don't really tend to focus very much on this is what happened this week. We tend to sort of zero in on one topic at a time, but I was prepared to just sort of skip this whole thing. But when you approached me with the idea of having a bit of a wider scope and have a look at this entire thing from a bit of a higher up angle, I think that would be interesting. Have a bit broader.
Yeah,
scope. I mean, some people in chat. Sorry, one moment here. Some people in chat are asking where Luddic Path is. He might be coming along. We had to start a bit early this week, and otherwise we'll have to assume that the Men in Black got him. So.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Possibly. Yeah. He's finally been.
Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of come in on that. I think one of the problems we have generally in the modern world is that everybody's got to be an expert in the moment, don't they? It doesn't matter whether it's Russia, Ukraine, Israel-Palestine. It could be, do you know what I mean? It could be China. It could be something else, Africa, There was something in Niger a couple months ago, but you've always got to be an expert. And I can kind of tell. I'm somebody who's followed this this geopolitical strong point for quite a long time. To be honest, I'm not an expert in the moment. In fact, it probably predates me even coming into the DR. So I do
Well,
have
it certainly predates me by at least 2 lifetimes. So.
well, it might be, but that may well be. But I don't want to set too high a bar and then end up, falling on a proverbial banana skin. But we'll get to that later.
Well, I mean, it is a very complicated topic, and I did some precursory research going in, and it's one of those things where it's a bit like the whole, when did the start of the fall of the Roman Empire begin? And it's one of those where did this all start? And you ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers, right? Some people start 5 years ago, some people start 10 years ago, some people say it's Woodrow Wilson's fault, etc., right? And then some people are like, well, the Bible says.
The Bible says. And then you're like, it's a big can of worms. I think, from the off, I'll just say, I think what's hard about this conflict is both sides are right and wrong at different stages of the conflict. I think that's why it's so polarizing. It's not a simple conflict to understand because of all the layers of history and politics and, yes, religion behind it. And I think it's particularly hard for the dissident right because, let's be honest here in no uncertain terms, these are two outer groups who we're against for different reasons. But
and that's how you get weird, as Ludwig called it, some guy at the end of the Roman Empire rooting for the barbarians, right? You get some strange activity with people sort of just knee-jerkingly supporting whoever their whoever is their least enemy, I suppose, without thinking about the implications or even considering that, what's the point? What's the point of, posting about your favorite freedom fighter or terrorist online that you learned about in the past 5 minutes?
It's impossible to pick sides, really. I mean, and, spoiler alert, I suppose our take today is not going to maybe please everyone. But, as I say, it is a very difficult thing there's no right or wrong here. So, we should keep that in mind. I mean, I think there's, to kick things off, I mean, there's many violent and contentious episodes in history which have led up till today. I think complicating things further, I think the guys on UO touched on this earlier in the week, is the way Con Inc. is kind of running cover for Israel in a very disingenuous way. And they do this every time there's an escalation of events in the Middle East. But some of the propaganda narratives have been, they've been pretty bad. And most of them are coming, to be honest, from the normie con right. But I still think our side has done pretty good from what I've seen. There's a lot of push and pull factors at work here. Not easy to break down, but hopefully we'll sort of unpack this in a way that we can all sort of follow and make sense of events.
Yes,
past,
I think
future.
Having had a look at what you have sort of noted down here, I think we should start with a bit of history, just broadly, of course, and then we can get into sort of course, we'll briefly just hit on what happened or what is happening, get to some of the commentary stuff, but I would also like to talk a bit about, which I saw you wrote about, is sort of the angle of the internal politics of Israel. Because without really getting too much into 4D chess, I'm interested in seeing how this could actually serve to bolster Israel's cohesion.
Sure. I'm glad you said that, because I think that's one area that has not been covered very well. by certain groups, especially the mainstream media. So I'm really kind of happy to hear you say that, because that's definitely something I want to unpack more. So yeah, the history. I mean, again, we start off with a very contentious part is just the founding of Israel. So I mean, Israel was forged in blood and war. There's just no escaping that fact. I mean, in terms of the modern state, we're not going to go back into biblical times, or the Old Testament says this, but following the end of World War One, when the Ottoman Empire was breaking up, the British controlled Palestine. It was called the British Mandate for Palestine. And it was agreed according to something called the Balfour Declaration, which our then Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour signed with a group of Zionist Jews who had, should we just say, wealthy backers. I mean, they're kind of, buying land, so you'd expect that. And the idea was basically a homeland for the Jewish people would be kind of constructed, erected within the British Mandate for Palestine. And initially, Jews were meant to be a minority, but as the 20s and the 30s got underway, more and more Jews started migrating to Israel, steadily increasing their numbers, particularly in the 1930s, following a lot of persecution from the National Socialists in Germany. And then eventually, at the end of World War II, numbers were really swelling, and Britain ended up basically turning the issue over to the United Nations. The UN proposed establishing two independent states, one for Arabs, one for Jews. Jews were, I think they were a little less than 6% of the population, but somehow they were granted, 55% of the land, including most of the arable land for agriculture.
What type of Jews these were?
I don't know if the breakdown between Ashkenazi and Sephardic. I presume if it's the end of the World War II, there's going to be a lot of Ashkenazi. Of course, a lot went to the United States in the aftermath of World War II, but most were to go to. A lot were going to Israel. Now, there's a lot more you could say about the founding of it, but basically, the UN resolution was passed in November 1947. The US played a big role in sort of rubber stamping it. And even that is very interesting, Woolworths, because at the time it was a Truman administration, and actually a lot of his advisors told him not to really sign off on this, but he did so anyway. But literally from day one, as soon as, by the time David Ben-Gurion, the first president of Israel, had been sworn in, the war erupted on the peninsula. So literally from that moment on. But before that, there's a lot of history as well, because there'd been a lot of there were a lot of problems with Zionists, with terrorist groups, the Irgun. Another one was called the Stern Gang, called Lehi in Hebrew. And they had conducted a war really against, especially the British and the Arabs there. And there's a lot of problems. I mean, there were numerous dozens of terrorist attacks against the British. The British basically fled. They basically fled and just left it with the UN.
Right.
There was the bombing.
They basically just gave up on it. Is that what you're saying?
They did, yeah, because Britain had a lot of other issues at the time, and after the King David Hotel bombing, where 91 people died, but I think it's about 20 odd Brits. And then there was a Goldschmidt's officers club bombing where another 17 people were killed. Many Arabs were as well. Some people point towards ethnic cleansing, as well as Zionists forced Palestinian Arabs out of their land. And this is something we'll get onto later, the Palestinian refugee crisis started right from day one. I think by 1948...
I was going to say, I seem to recall that there were quite a few refugees from Palestine already when it opened.
Yeah, there were
when it was founded.
300,000. Yeah, 300,000 by 1948. And this was mainly at the hands of militant groups that were, look, I mean, to be honest, they were terrorist groups. The remarkable thing, I mean, you hear this a lot from Conning, who were running cover for Israel, talking about terrorism this, terrorism that. Well, Israel was basically, founded to a large extent by what would be conventionally known now as terrorists. And the two leaders of those groups, Walrus, the Irgun, the Sterngan, Menachem Begin from Irgun, and Yitzhak Shamir. I mean, they go on to be prime ministers. So, they've had two heads of state that are actually terrorists. Menachem Begin was actually wanted by the British indefinitely, so he can actually travel to British soil. Yeah. There's other things as well that need to be taken into account. After the UN resolution had passed, there was a lot of movement for a two-state solution, something we'll get onto later. And a member of the Swedish royal family actually headed the official UN movement for a two-state solution. He was very sympathetic to Palestine. His name was Count Folke Bernadotte. I think I'm saying that right. He was related to the Swedish royal family, and he was gunned down in brutal, heinous fashion by the Stern gang.
It's probably pronounced Folke.
Folke, yes. Folke Bernadotte. He was gunned down in a really heinous fashion by the Stern gang, who shot him at point blank range. So, I mean, there's... Do
you know when this was?
This was, I think, again in the late 40s, round about then. But he was very, it was 48. It was somewhere in Jerusalem, and he wanted to, he wanted to bring the idea of a two-state solution back to the UN at the time.
It's strange because I don't really understand. It's funny you should mention this far back. There's this random Swedish guy, because for a long time, sort of the playing the role of the diplomat and peace broker in the Middle East, especially between Palestine and Israel, is a big thing for some reason in Sweden and Norway. If you work in like the foreign ministry. Right. Yeah, that's a huge thing to send diplomats, and even now, once that sort of this conflict started up, it's talk of like, we're going to send diplomats and we're going to try to broker a peace, and then we realized we don't have any money anymore because times are hard and we can't even bring our own people back. So never mind.
Yeah,
but I don't. It's a weird thing that the Nordics should have such a high interest in like brokering peace between these people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
I guess it's a bit of a prestige project, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe there's a few things there. I'm not sure, but there was the Oslo Accords, of course. So you're kind of right about that. Actually, I remember hearing people reach out to the Nords to be like advocates of peace and arbiters between two sides. I think I've definitely seen that in other episodes in history, but that's so. Even its founding, I mean, I've probably given a very kind of layman's overview of it, but there's a lot more you could reach into. But there was problems from the beginning. I mean, Israel sort of won the first Arab-Israeli war, but there were subsequent wars in '67 in 73. And I think, we probably don't have the time to go into all of these, but the problem is there was no conventional winner of these wars. Territory was gained, territory was lost. Negotiations kind of were ongoing. They eventually formed part of the backdrop of the Cold War, of course, and whatnot. But the history. Obviously, there's history before that as well, but I'm not too
obviously
sort of sharp on that. But that's right. But there's a lot to unpack there alone, really. So.
Well, sure. So on the other side of this, we have Hamas representing the Palestinians. For laymen like me, what can you tell me about them?
Yeah, I mean, this is also very questionable. I mean, Hamas really, I think they were founded in the 80s, and one big sort of line in the sand that was crossed is something called the Intifadas. So this was where Palestinians were called upon to basically engage in guerrilla attacks against Israelis indiscriminately, civilians and whatnot. And I'm not sure if this is right, but I think this is where the first suicide bomber, the idea was founded. And out of this came Hamas, who started off as a semi-militant group that actually had a political representation. So they really grew after the first Intifada, but they really came to prominence in the 2000s, really since 2007, when Israel kind of blockaded Gaza by land, sea and air. And Hamas it depends whose side you want to take, or a lot of people feel they've been forced into power because there's essentially no other game.
It becomes sort of language games about, their reason for existence, I suppose.
Exactly. I mean, their legitimacy is, a point of a lot of contentious debate. Now, I didn't know this until I started preparing for our stream, but a lot of people, a lot of real experts and analysts feel that Israel has, they've kind of they have made moves to actually strengthen Hamas's legitimacy, which might sound a bit strange, but they're kind of playing their version of 4D, 5D chess, because the more prominence Hamas gains, the more Israel can discredit the idea of the two-state solution.
Right.
It sounds a bit strange. Whereas if they go with the
there is big-brained incentive there for Israel to keep Hamas around, right?
Well, that's what a lot of people
it's
have
a bit.
said. Yeah, because they can turn around and say to the UN, to the United States, to other major powers, look, we can't deal with them because we got these terrorist groups, and we can't negotiate with them or anything. We'll get into the various solutions.
You said some people had said this. Is this a mainstream? Like, are there sort of prominent geopolitics people who support this?
I think this is a narrative that really is left out of the centre-right conning version of events, because it doesn't really, to the idea that Israel's been playing 5D chess behind a lot of people's back and has actually been strengthening Hamas's hand, doesn't fit the conventional narrative that Israel are the perpetual victims here. But it's a very complicated thing. I can't say I know everything about Hamas's origins and things, but one problem for Palestine is over the years, basically as the decades have rolled on, the Arab coalition around Palestine has basically slowly broken down. It's basically collapsed for different reasons. And
you said the Arab coalition, is that various peoples or tribes?
Yeah, that's right. What I mean by that, Wars, is in the various Arab-Israeli wars, there was a coalition of states. There was all the bordering states, Jordan, Syria. There was Egypt from the Sinai side. There was Lebanon. Iraq doesn't border Israel, but Iraq contributed heavily. Even Saudi Arabia actually was a protagonist in the 67 Arab-Israeli war. So all these states, wars came together to collectively attack Israel. Now, fair play, Israel managed to emerge victorious in spite of that coalition. But there's been, especially in the 2000s, there's been the Arab Spring. There's been America's invasion of Afghanistan, then Iraq, more so Iraq.
Yeah.
There's been the Syrian civil war. Lebanon is riddled with instability, although even that is partly down to Israel for other things. Iran has stepped in. Jordan has kind of pulled away. They're much more kind of in the American, they're kind of, how do I say, unofficially in the American orbit now. They're much more neutral. And basically this coalition, which supported Palestine, has dissolved. It's been abolished. So that's kind of pushed them in a way into Hamas's arms. But some people just cite poverty, declining conditions, the barricade, the blockade of Gaza, as well as just the indiscriminate attacks on Palestinians as really strengthening Hamas's hand. I should point out, for people who are kind of new to this, Palestine is split in two. I don't know if you know, there's the Gaza Strip, which is a strip which borders Egypt and the Mediterranean. If you like, that's on the west side of Israel. And then there's what's called the West Bank, which is in Jerusalem. It's called the West Bank because it straddles the River Jordan, so the bank of the River Jordan. So Hamas are only operational in Gaza. Now, obviously, what happens in Gaza kind of reverberates to the West Bank. But this is now. We should point out that Hamas don't necessarily represent all of Palestine or all Palestinians.
Just one moment here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, my browser has frozen because I tried to share a map. So, but apparently I can still speak. So go ahead, but I might disappear for a moment.
Oh yeah, is it the map of the declining Palestinian lands and things? Is it? Okay, is it coming? Yeah, this is.
Here we go. Okay.
Yeah, so the Gaza Strip is what's on screen now. So it borders Egypt and Israel and the Mediterranean, and that has since 2007 been blockaded by Israel by land, sea, and air. It's basically a huge prison. It is a prison, really, because Israel tracks the movement of people, of shipments in and out of Gaza, where there are checkpoints everywhere. Gazans are forced to queue, have their belongings searched and everything. Now, to be fair, in the name of fairness, I wouldn't say that that's all kind of some of this the Palestinians have brought on themselves, because if you remember, I mentioned the intifadas where people would turn themselves into suicide bombers.
Right.
Israel has had to erect some kind of, what I mean?
You need some defense against terrorism.
Yeah, so they've got the main one are the walls, actually. The walls of fortification, the checkpoints are as well. So it's a very, it's a very murky issue, really. But in Gaza, the scene is terrible. I mean, it's a bit hard now. I'm not sure if I've got the image, but I don't mean to choose my words kindly, but it just looks like hell. It looks like hell has been and gone. If you ever
it's a bit hard, when you get the images on the news, they're pretty bad. But just sort of Googling the Gaza Strip and just scrolling down till you get to
Yeah,
just images on the ground. There is a lot of ruins from various,
yeah.
skirmishes or bombings, and that never seem to be rebuilt, right? So it's just progressively sort of deteriorating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just looks horrendous. There's just over 2 million people in Gaza. 50% are children under the age of 16, and it's estimated that 80% live below the poverty line. Um, and there's, the West Bank is certainly um, more free and more prosperous than Gaza, but that isn't really saying a lot. So anyway, I mean, just to zoom out a bit, I mean, the kind of vociferous response by Muslims worldwide is because, and this is, you don't hear on the Piers Morgan show from Ben Shapiro, from Douglas Murray or anything, and this is where I have a bit of sympathy with the Muslims and definitely the Palestinians, and that's that they're being occupied. Israel is an occupying force, and people use terms like terrorism. Well, in a sense, I'm not saying they don't have any choice, but essentially they're being occupied and they're being persecuted,
Mm.
and if and that's the reason, and the conditions in the Gaza Strip are a big reason for that. So it depends who you. Israel has closed off electricity, food, water, fuel, but even normally these would undergo inspection, and it's kind of not a very good situation for them there. So over the years, the displacement of the Palestinians is definitely one of the more serious humanitarian disasters in the world, really. I mean, there's been a lot of misinformation about this from people saying, oh, well, why don't the Arab countries take the refugees? Nominally, I'd agree, but Syria has 580,000 Palestinians, Lebanon, 480,000, and Jordan, it's disputed, but it's between 2 and 2.4 million.
Jesus.
So exactly, it's ridiculous. I mean, I think they've only got 7-8 million people in the country, or something like 10 million
Now,
around Norway's population. But I mean, a lot of people are posting things. Oh, they should take them. But now the Gulf states is a different issue altogether, because they don't take any refugees, Muslim or
right.
otherwise. They did the same thing.
I have a message here. We have coming in from the locker room here with a steel chair is Luddic Path. How are you doing?
Yes, hello. I got away from the Mossad interrogation in time, just to at least get the other half. So, well, it's good.
Very good.
You should just keep going, and I'll try to interject when if I have something.
Yeah,
right.
That's
sorry, it
great.
Keep going. Yeah,
I'm happy about that. Yeah. So the problem is that the longer this Israel's bombardment and retaliatory attacks continues, the worse it's going to be, and the greater the humanitarian crisis. Egypt doesn't want to take. I don't know how many Egypt actually has, but I don't think, to be honest, I don't think anybody really wants to take any more. I mean, Syria and Lebanon are bad enough as it is. I mean, they're already locked in civil strife. So, yeah, it's a very desperate situation. We definitely don't want them coming to Europe. I mean, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, we'll get into it when we get to the commentary, but that's sort of one of the storylines being spun up here, is the weird duality of, protect Israel, but prepare to take Palestinian refugees, right?
Yeah, that's good. Do you want to? This might be a good time to segue into what's called the proposed solutions. Should we? What do you think we should?
Yeah, I think that's good, because I mean, obviously, the problem here is this is land that supposedly Israel lays claim to, but just displacing the Palestinians doesn't seem to be an option. Otherwise, I feel like they would have done that already.
Yeah, well, you'll often hear in the news, in the mainstream media, these solutions, the one-state solution, the two-state solution. And I think that when I finish here, I mean, I'll just give my opinion. Other people have theirs, but then we can sort of move into the internal politics of Israel, because all these things are bound up together. So one-state solution, that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen because, well, basically both solutions are unworkable, but for different reasons. The one-state solution isn't going to happen because if Israel absorbs all the Palestinian territories into one unified state, and the UN right of return articles are enacted, and all those Palestinian refugees we just mentioned, if they return back to, a unified one state, then Israelis would barely be more than 50% of the population. There's some debate about the demographics, but that's roughly how it is. They'd be a bit more than 50% of the population. And that's the situation that Israel wants to avoid. And considering the mutual animosity and hostility that's built up over the years, I mean, it would be unworkable. It'd just be unthinkable to have the two groups living side by side. It just it confounds all reasonable belief. This isn't East and West Germany or anything like that.
No, this is. I mean, the Palestinians probably don't want that either. I would imagine they obviously think the country of Israel in that sense is theirs originally, right?
Well, exactly. That's a very good point, because we often take this either from the Israeli vantage point or the neutral one, and I'm guilty of that myself. But Palestinians look at this very, very differently, to be honest with you. And that's one of the things they actually say. It's quite funny. The UN, the sub-UN refugee group for Palestine, it's not the UNHCR. It's another one. They actually have a dedicated one for Palestinians. They actually count the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank as refugees because Israel is an occupying force on their land. So
right.
The definitions and the numbers get a bit, gets a bit, they conflate and it gets a bit confusing. But there's not going to be a one-state solution because it's just unworkable. Now, a two-state solution is actually a lot more complicated. So, in principle, Israel refuses a two-state solution because they see Palestine as a hostile actor. They actually see them as a terrorist state, and they actually refuse to enter into negotiations with them, especially when Hamas is on the ballot. Palestinian authorities are a bit different, but the problem is the Palestinian Authority are much more willing to pursue a two-state solution than Hamas. But the problem is, as we said about 10 minutes ago, they've, systematically, their power has broken down for a number of reasons. Yeah. But the problem is Israel won't even come to the negotiating table whilst Hamas are in power. So they don't have to entertain this solution. So again, the 5D chess means that
just interjecting a bit here, because there's just a few things that I know just as a Norwegian. I mean, you have like the Oslo Accords from the 90s, and that was basically trying to bring about some kind of negotiation between Israel and Palestine for a two-state solution. I think this was when Yasser Arafat was sitting president or something.
That's true. The Oslo Accords were a big, it was then seen as a victory for, many people, Arafat and Bill Clinton at the time, who was a president of the United States. But the problem is with the Oslo Accords is nobody stuck to the articles. Israel has carried on building settlements in the West Bank. That's something we'll get onto. But whether it's the Camp David Agreement in the 80s with Jimmy Carter, the Oslo Accords, for a number of reasons, these always look good in theory. It's a great press and media moment. People get to virtue signal. You get all the, the gestures for peace. But in theory, in practice, the promised land is never reached. And the promises never materialized. Now, there's different reasons for that. One of the big problems is, guys, over the years, over the decades, a lot of marginal extremist fundamental groups from both Palestine and Israel have took it upon themselves to ignore their government and to sort of enact policy as they see it. Now, in Palestine's case, that's led to really Hamas, but even before Hamas, there's a number of groups. I mean, there's the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, that carried out a number of terrorist attacks in the 80s, particularly in France, in other places. I think, I'm not sure, but I think even a member of the PLO assassinated Robert Kennedy in the 60s, because he was assassinated by a Palestinian. But this is it's just, there's everywhere you look, there are problems, to be honest, and there's just no way of burying the history and sort of moving on. But anyway, sorry, just to go back to the two-state thing, Israel has said that they refuse to share either a soft or a hard border with what they see as a terrorist nation. Now, complicating all of this, the idea of the two-state solution are the settlements in the West Bank. So just to put it in layman's terms, the settlements are basically territories that Israelis, particularly Zionists and more radical, more fundamental groups in Israel, have seized from the West Bank, particularly East Jerusalem, which by law should be Palestine's. And they basically colonized it bit by bit, piece by piece, and they've reduced the Palestinians to a minority in some areas of the area. And this is seen as many as being almost like a microcosm for the entire problem, if you think about it. And the settlements are something that even the Americans have spoken against, and has met with resounding sort of international condemnation. But but anyway, everything I've said till now on the two solutions, that's kind of the sanitized version, the above board version of events. But the truth is, I don't think Israel they don't want a two-state solution either. I don't think
there's no incentive for them to, right? I mean, they're holding all the cards right now, or have been for quite a while, right?
Exactly. They have to cede a lot of territory, a lot of power, a lot of social, political capital. And really, all they're doing is just kicking the can down the road, really. They just want to keep the situation going on and on. But the problem is that there are... it's just really difficult. I was listening to John Mearsheimer, of all people. I was actually researching something else. I wasn't researching the stream. And he popped up on my timeline, and he was saying that, Israel has encouraged Hamas because, again, this discredits the idea of a two-state solution. The more power Hamas gets, the more this inadvertently, indirectly discredits the two states thing. Whereas,
and as long as Israel overpowers Hamas, they can, keep that balance quite easily, right?
Yeah. Whereas previous leaders, Yasser Arafat and even Abbas now, they actually want to pursue some sort of version of the two-state solution, but it's just not really workable. So what actually is going on here? Well, at this point, you've got to pivot to what's happening within Israel, and this is something where I feel like has not been really touched upon by a lot of people, because Israel's internal politics have a big influence on events as well. Because what's happened is Israel's demographics have kind of flipped, and this is reflected in the makeup of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, and this has impacted all the government's policy. Because technically Netanyahu is in coalition with two right-wing, two fundamentalist parties. They're called the Religious Zionist Party and the Jewish Power Party. And they're both basically Zionists, and they totally outright refuse to recognize Palestine. They don't want to engage with them on any level about anything. And in fact, they envisage what some people call a greater Israel, which incredibly includes parts of Jordan and the West Bank, the Jordan River, into Jordan, and also the Sinai Peninsula on the Egyptian side as well. And also, if all of that wasn't enough, I think the really radical one, the Religious Zionist Party, they want the Palestinians to leave altogether. They want them to relocate to other countries. And the problem is Netanyahu's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because he has to be seen to be punching right, because otherwise he'll get outflanked by these two groups. So a lot of people are, and I think they're right to criticize Netanyahu, but the broader picture is he doesn't really have much choice, because if he's not punching right, he's probably going to lose more votes. And, the more power these parties get in the Knesset, in Israel generally, Israeli society, the less likely a two-state solution is, because put simply, they don't envisage any compromise with Palestine whatsoever. So it's very difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult as well. Another thing that complicates it even further is Israel's legislative structure. So the two leaders of these groups, and you know what, can't remember their names, Hebrew names, but one of them is the Minister of National Security, and the other one is the Minister for Finance, and also the de facto Minister for Defense. That comes from the Caspian report. Really, they did an excellent video on this. So it's very, very problematic, really. I'll just say, sorry, just rounding this off, in terms of Israel generally, they have a kind of structural problem within Israeli society, and that's that Orthodox Jews, the Orthodox Jewish population, sometimes called Hasidic Jews, have been growing, shooting up in numbers, while the birth rate of the secular Jews, which are kind of represented in the Tel Aviv, Haifa kind of coalition, whereas the Orthodox Jews, they tend to dominate Jerusalem. They've kind of plateaued, a bit like in Western countries, really. They're just kind of liberal, and they're down with the sort of globo-homo thing and whatnot.
Yeah, that's the thing we saw a couple of months ago when Netanyahu did his political move, is that the liberal class got out in numbers to cry about something, right?
Yeah, it's a big problem. I mean, they don't pay taxes, they don't do military service. All they do is they go to the Jewish religious schools and they just read the Torah, they read the Talmud, and that's all they do. But to them, they are Israel because they're the spiritual heart of the country.
It's strange, right? Because it's like this microcosm of the value of the spiritualism versus the value of the GDP clashing.
Right.
Are you guys telling me that breed them out actually works?
Yeah,
I'm confused right now.
So that's their
version.
as long as you can keep your borders closed, Luddy.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's.
I was just a little confused there. So you're saying like the Hasidic Jews, the Orthodox Jews, they don't pay taxes, or is it because they don't
law? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they don't work because work is against their religious law. I mean, they don't even, like Sabbath, right? Where they're not supposed to use machinery or technology. It's basically like that for them, most of the week, and they don't get jobs. They just go to yeshiva and they just study scripture. That's all they do. That's all they do. And
Well, I mean, are they like farmers or something? Like they live on self-subsistence?
well, some of them do. I mean, there's different types. I mean, there are some that are in agriculture. I mean, there are some that are ultra Zionists, and they're the ones that go into the settlements and whatnot. And and I think they're kind of propped up by particularly the New York kind of Orthodox community as well. And they're funded by the broader global Jewish Zionist movement. I mean, we have them in the UK too, in London, in North London, and things like that. But I'm sorry, I don't know all the ins and outs of this sort of demographic clash. But they live away from the secular Jews, and some of them, I've even seen a documentary that says that some of them don't consider the secular Jews to be Jewish at all, actually. So there's that too. But the point is, I think the main point is that as they've grown and they've swollen in numbers, this is reflected in the makeup of the Israeli parliament and the distribution of voting powers, and eventually, this is going to impact policy and how the government acts, even if it's another party. So I think some people say that this could could actually end up destabilizing Israel far more than the conflict. But maybe that's something that's going to be debated, sort of back and forth. But it's basically a very delicate balance at the moment.
So,
any way you look at it.
With all of this, I suppose, should we do 5 minutes on the happening, on the recent engagements?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Just
I mean, we can
catch everyone up to speed. Yeah.
Yeah, because basically what happens is, I mean, I know there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of politics and history, and it's wrapped up in emotionally charged events. But actually, what tends to happen is, Hamas attacks Israel, and then Israel responds normally they respond with overwhelming force, and that results in large numbers of casualties for the Palestinians. And that's normally how things go. There's some mediation, international mediation, and then things settle down, and then the status quo kind of resumes right up until the next next violent act or something. But this time, a lot of people have seen a lot of differences. It's said that Hamas planned these attacks years in advance, actually. So I'm not sure how true that is. But there's this one was a lot different. It was highly coordinated. There's a lot more technology involved. The execution, just has hallmarks that haven't been there before. They said that 4,000 missiles were fired. Drones were used to take out the CCTV things. And what's quite surprising is Israel's Iron Dome defense shield was beaten. Bombs were used to break fortifications, trucks. They then used trucks, motorcycles, and paragliders to storm areas. And a lot of people saying this is the biggest escalation since the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Obviously, it's the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War as well. That can't be forgotten either. But the problem is, if violence spreads to the West Bank, things could escalate very fast. And even more so, there's even hints that some of the surrounding countries are going to get involved. I mean, Israel has already struck Syria. There's been white phosphorus in Lebanon and the border towns. And of course, there is the hint, the question mark of Iran, and whether Iran are behind this. Iran does fund Hamas, and they have made a series of, unequivocal statements condemning Israel, supporting Palestine and things. So, where it goes from here, I mean, it's unfolding in real time, so it's quite challenging, really, to keep up to speed with things, much less do a stream. But there are other geopolitical interests that are potentially at stake as well. So, there's I don't know what we're up to with casualties now. I think we're into the thousands.
Well, with the whole power shut off and water shut off, I'm not sure if that's still going. I mean, the casualties can be ramping without, having any clear counter. Side effects might be quite big.
Yeah, that's right. It's and there's a big difference between Western media sources, non-Western media ones. I mean, what's coming out of Al Jazeera is kind of horrific, really. But it's the usual kind of events that have played out. I mean, it's just how far things escalate. To be fair, it's
right, because I mean, I suppose we'll go into the commentary section here now, if you don't have anything else, because what I'm kind of interested with is sort of what's going to come out of this.
Right, exactly. I mean,
how is this going to end in a way that's favorable for me at all?
Right.
That's how I'm looking at it. The only way I can think this is going to end well for me is if nukes get deployed. But I'm not going to go more into detail.
I don't know. I just don't. It's just, there's all kinds of push and pull factors here. I mean, there are some geopolitical considerations that have been covered by groups like the Duran, again, the Caspian Report. This lies with Iran, but again, not surprisingly, Iran and Saudi Arabia. We could go into that, but I mean, I warn you, it's quite complicated. So basically, America has for a long time now, for a few years, they've been trying to build this coalition with Saudi Arabia and Israel, kind of if you like, almost they're calling it like a Middle East NATO. And it's very precarious as it is. And this is something that Iran doesn't really want to see happen. Saudi Arabia's got a lot riding on this. They've got weapons and munitions deals with America, with some Israeli technology involved. They've also got nuclear facilities, which may be rolled out very soon. Saudi Arabia is looking to diversify their economy. The Saudis already are fighting Iran in the Persian Gulf with proxy battles, and then Iranian proxies in the south with Yemen. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, the Houthi rebels, which are on the border.
Oh, yeah.
This is all playing out. So Saudi Arabia really want this broader security umbrella. Complicating things even further was at the G20, and this is going to be quite big. India has launched a rival to China's Belt and Road Initiative. It's called the India, Middle East, Europe road, basically. So it goes from India through Oman and the UAE, through Saudi Arabia and Israel, and then into Europe through the Mediterranean, bypassing Turkey. And so it's all countries that are within America's orbit. This was unveiled earlier this year at the G20. So that's another thing to bring to take into account. Now, Iran doesn't want any of this, basically, simply put. Iran wants to destabilize the entire edifice around this. So they're funding proxy attacks, rebel groups, and things like that. It's all very precarious. The other complicating things even further is that, Syria, Lebanon, they're all embroiled in their own kind of internal problems too. I mean, Syria isn't an allied state, but this has also been playing on in the background. So the reason the logic is that Iran some people say Iran have funded and basically provided the foundations for this attack because it's going to derail and destabilize progress on this broader kind of US-led coalition. So it's quite interesting. I recommend the Caspian Reports video on this. They did a really good.
I think I've seen that one. They've been pretty good on most things. They're good at staying sort of objective. If not neutral, they try to stick to the facts at least.
Of course, yeah, they are very good. Of course, you know, Iran is a mutual enemy of both Saudi Arabia and Israel. So in a way it works, but how the US is going to keep this together, I don't know. Now, obviously, the recent attacks are going to be a big setback because...
donate more money to the Republican Party, guys. That's
right, yeah, exactly. I mean, and even within the deals, bin Salman from Saudi Arabia, he said that the Palestinian question is an issue for this deal to go through. And if you go back to what I was saying about the Zionist parties in the Knesset, you know, they oppose this wholeheartedly, and they don't really want anything to do with this. So, you know, they don't want this coalition to go through. The religious Zionist party, the Jewish Power Party, the Zionists aren't interested in it, but Likud is, and so are the left-wing party in Israel. So it's very, very complicated. Yeah, I mean, bin Salman said, in no uncertain terms, the settlements, there's going to have to be a reversal. Like the settlements are going to have to return to Palestine. It needs to be substantial. And there's one area in particular, it's called Area C, which is the subject of a lot of escalation and between Palestinians and Israelis. So I don't know if this US-led coalition is going to, if it's going to hold up, to be honest. But that's it, yeah.
Speaking of the US,
yeah.
because the US obviously has interests in all of this, but there's a lot of noise coming from a lot of wings over there as well.
It's absolutely
and I know
crazy.
You've written some notes about who supports what and what levels of, you said 5D chess we are on.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's, you know, especially within the Republican wing of the party. I mean, I could not believe last week watching Lindsey Graham, Nikki Haley. I mean, these people are mad. I mean, if they got their way, America would be at war on all four corners of the globe. They'd be at war with the Eskimos right through to, I don't know, you name it. It's crazy. So basically, you know, I mean, obviously everybody knows America has been funding Israel for decades now, and really since its inception. Israel just, I don't know, I don't see, Israel's existence is predicated on US hegemony, in my opinion. I've always maintained that. But, you know, there's obviously a lot of debate as to what to do, and the kind of neocons, I can't believe they're still around, but the neocon faction led by Lindsey Graham, Nikki Haley, Mike Pence. Of course, Nikki Haley and Mike Pence are Republican candidates for the Republican nomination for 2024. They're using this to push for war with Iran, unbelievably. But what's interesting is on the other side, you've got Trump, you've got Vivek Ramaswamy, you've got Josh Hawley, who are calling for restraint, and they want a more kind of isolated, isolationist role for the US. Now, just going back a few minutes to the that new security apparatus, the interesting thing is the US has pioneered it with a view to leaving the region, steadily withdrawing from the Middle East. That's why they want to embolden Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan and other states, maybe the other OPEC states as well. So but the neocons, they, they want war. They always want war. But what happens now? I mean, America's already been funding Ukraine.
I mean,
for
they
the
can't
last
back down. Yeah.
And is it a coincidence that recently they announced, the White House press office announced that they're going to be drawing back on funding for Ukraine? I'm not, Janet Yellen says yesterday, absolutely, America can afford another war. Well, can the American taxpayer? I mean, what are you going
Right.
to do?
That's the thing. Yeah.
They're already having problems with the bonds and things. And when the next debt
And not
rolls
just
around,
that, I mean, the supply lines and the production of all the equipment and ammunition that's required. I mean, it's already a problem with Ukraine to a certain extent, and it could get even worse if you have to supply two fronts, basically. So
yeah, exactly.
yes, they
Yeah.
might be able to afford it, but are they actually able to do it? And that's sort of the thing where
Yeah, I think this is
some of the neocons, I think, are living in their own bubble a bit, like it's 30 years
yeah.
ago.
I mean,
And they think they can play more advanced strategies than they actually can.
yeah, they
And
think
the
this is the
apparatus
Cold
around them
War.
isn't as competent as it used to be. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
well, the 4D chess strategy isn't actually there because no one really knows how to employ it.
They think this is like Cold War kind of era kind of strategy will work. I mean, well, what do you notice about Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, Lindsey Graham? They're all Xers and they're all boomers, right? Whereas at least Josh Hawley, Vivek Ramaswamy, at least they're a bit younger. They kind of have a bit more of a broader view of things, as does Donald Trump. I mean, Trump, actually, whilst we're there with the Donald, he even said when he left office, one of the reasons why he gave Israel so many concessions was hopefully to bring them to the peace table to follow a two-state solution. But he left and he said, well, they don't want peace. They don't want a solution. So, it remains to be seen, what the US is going to do. But I mean, Israel can only get away with all this violence.
Yeah, just shooting in here. In terms of Trump, I've seen some comments about like 4D chess and non-4D chess. I mean, in retrospect, someone who was not playing any 4D chess was really Donald Trump. I mean, like the more I think about it, I just sit and like cringe at like ever having tried to support him. To be honest, it's something that I will have to just sweep under the rug. That I supported Trump and thought that he actually had some kind of like hidden genius plan or something, which is like the further away we get from it, like
you can support him for what he was, but don't support him for what he wasn't, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Trump thing, I think it's hard because he was betrayed by people within his own party, John Bolton, Mike Pompeo. I think because he had a different vision for America, but I mean that's right. He didn't really do anything that he campaigned on, or that we would have wanted him to do. But
it's like I remember a conversation I had with my father, I think, after the election in 2020, and he said to me that. I'm not sure if I agree with him, but this was the conversation anyway. He said that the 2016 election, the vote for Trump in 2016 was essentially a political mutiny by a class of people that had been consistently betrayed by their government for decades, right? And then I responded with, well, but then everything that happened after 2016 and with the election in 2020, the response to that mutiny was sit down or we're going to kill you. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was basically, mutiny denied, right?
I think if you're going to be a political realist, you have to apply political realism across the board, and I think that's something that's a bit of a failure in some of these right-wing circles. I mean, you have this slogan, right? If you're going to take shots at the king, you better not miss. You don't get
Exactly,
two chances at taking shots at the king, and that's sort of the Trump story. Like, he took shots at the king and he missed. It's like this. I don't know who tweeted this out, but if you're going out and like threatening your political enemies with jail, right? We're gonna lock her up, and I'm gonna put all my enemies in jail.
You better follow
and
through once you have that power.
You get power, and you don't put them in jail, and then you're out of power, and they put you in jail. There's something to be learned there, about like.
And that's the one thing I have sort of taken out of this conflict is seeing how many people in Norwegian politics on the conservative side are good at playing this game, but they're not good at playing it unless they're defending Israel, basically. That really hurts because that means they know how to do it. They're just either blind or willingly ignoring it in their own politics.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's. I mean, Trump's Abraham Accords. They had so much promise, but it's just like it's the same thing with the Oslo Accords. It's the same thing with the Camp David Agreement.
There's no incentive for Israel to follow them, right?
Yeah, all the time. But I know I'm a big fan of this show, but Frody and Mark, thankfully, they did their show yesterday, which I managed to catch. And Mark Webber made a good point when he said that, look, I mean, Israel just isn't serious about the two-state solution. But by the same token, America knows that they can't press them on it. If they had somebody who would press them hard on it, then things might work. But then, of course, that's going to rebound on them domestically because of the amount of influence and power that the Jewish community has in America, in the US domestically. It's said that Obama really did press Netanyahu on it, and this is why Obama never really got on with Israel, with Netanyahu, because he could see through the hypocrisy and whatnot. But if we had a White House, a Democrat or Republican-led administration that would really hold their feet to the flames, and maybe something would get done. But I'd just like to, maybe we can segue into the media here. I mean, Ramaswamy, he made the point that, because he's self-funding his campaign, but he's been against the neocon Zionist coalition from the beginning. And he said on Tucker's show, look, if I couldn't fund my campaign, I wouldn't be here, because you can't oppose these people and expect to run, because they'll just destroy you on the campaign with campaign funding or lack thereof, because, of their power and influence and wealth and whatnot. So, I think that's a point we've got to keep in mind. And I remember when us lot, we did the Nixon stream, and I was preparing for that. And even the books I read then, the one book I read on Nixon and Kissinger said that, Nixon was always had his hands tied because he was always, trying to appease Jews in America, and I think even Kissinger recently has kind of spoken out about this and their disproportionate influence over the US, and how they've really stood in the way of realistic peace negotiations and whatnot. But this stuff is it's quite nuanced, quite complex and layered. But I just don't see them realistically wanting to pursue peace on any other terms but their own. And these Zionist parties, I mean, they're like the neocons. They're like two sides of the same coin. I mean, we're screwed if both of them get into power in Israel and America. But it's interesting because I think whilst it's a bit predictable from the White House, on the media front, it's quite interesting because Tucker has kind of taken issue with the whole conflict. And I don't know if you saw Ben Shapiro, he absolutely lost his mind with Tucker Carlson and his take on it. And, the media game is almost as interesting as the actual conflict itself in some areas, as there's been a lot of issues on that side as well. But UK British Conservatives, normicons, they're shilling hard for Israel, Douglas Murray, these types of people. So it's the same. Yeah, it's the same cycle of events. I'm not sure what it's like in Norway, Scandinavia. I mean, what's it been like there with the reporting and things?
Well, I mean, surprisingly apathetic, I think, compared to what I expected. But like the Norwegian political landscape with the Israel-Palestine thing has usually been like, if you're on the right, you're pro-Israel. If you're on the left, you're pro-Palestinian. I mean, the right has been very dominant in the last maybe 10 years of Norwegian politics, but for a very long time, it's been sort of like leftist-led coalitions. And I mean, I guess that's part of like why the Oslo Accords happened in Oslo, because there's been, there's so many humanitarians in the Norwegian political machine, and they've always been interested in trying to, basically create the two-state solution. You have like so many people who are in this kind of elite, the art scene, and a lot of these intellectuals that are pro-Palestine. So it's not a sort of very hegemonic thing like you'd sort of expect. If you're in the United States, I know it's different, right? Because it's just all Israel all the time. But in Norway, it's really not that way. I don't know, Walrus, if you could back that up or not.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing. There is a certain coalition on the right with a lot of the Christians have their sort of parishes, etc., have dealings with the Israelis. It's very strange. Like they send money and support. So wherever there are like Christians on the right, they are also very pro-Palestine because they have literal ties to Israel. And it's the religious connection, obviously. That's the thing there. We have a super chat here from Peregrinus de Flandria for £2. I didn't want to interrupt our conversation, so I had to keep it on the back burner a bit. Sorry about that. If the US goes to war, is that good or bad for the petrodollar?
Yeah, well, right, interesting. I mean, the petrodollar, OPEC states are, there's two sides of the Middle East. There's the Mediterranean, and then there's the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea kind of area, sort of thing, the Arabian Peninsula. The OPEC nations are all in the Gulf and the Arabian Sea. The ones on the Mediterranean side, the ones that, involved in the Arab coalition against Israel and Israel's borders, I don't think they're OPEC states. I'm not sure Egypt might be. But ultimately, I mean, it's a bit of a different question, but that is in the background. It's always in the background because that's the reason America is in the Middle East to begin with. It's not for human rights. It's not for freedoms or anything like that. And it's not even really strictly speaking for Israel. You see, the nationalists, they'll say, oh, they're there to protect Israel and this and that. I take issue with that. I think the petrodollar really comes first. Not sure how many military bases or installations the US had there before the petrodollar agreement was ratified. It may have been a few, but it's certainly more since then. I mean, the problem is all these things play into each other, and America is they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. I mentioned this in Petrodollar Part 3. I think you even mentioned this as well, Walrus, our first stream together. It's like the longer America stays there and the more they embed themselves in the internal affairs, the more unstable it gets. But the problem is if they leave altogether, then what happens? They can't just leave at the click of a finger. It's got to be done gradually. It's got to be done incrementally. But the problem is...
Because they need something there to keep the thing going, right?
Exactly. They need some kind of presence there. So I guess if they have, if you like, proxies in the form of Israel and Saudi Arabia, but how's that ever going to work? I mean, Israel, Saudi was part of the Arab coalitions in the Arab-Israeli wars. It's just, I don't see how it works. And of course, America, it doesn't vacate anywhere easily or properly, not in Korea, not Vietnam, not Afghanistan. Every time they leave, it's just another
shit show.
it's just another escalation. So
It's one thing the Americans can't seem to figure out is, retreat. Good for you guys.
They know how to start the wars. They know how to do
Yeah.
the false flags and the propaganda and the Edward Bernays and things like that. But yeah, that's all interesting. Now, of course, there's another interesting aspect to all this that we can't really talk about. We can't really forget, and that's kind of the fifth column, and that's these huge numbers of Muslims in the West, particularly in Europe, but we're also seeing them in Australia. We're seeing them in America as well, and this has kind of formed part of the landscape, hasn't it? Because I couldn't believe what I was watching in London. I mean, it's crazy. Of course, the problem is that as geopolitical events have unfolded, the wars, the petrodollar wars from America has led to the migrant crisis, and you've got this huge kind of critical mass of Muslims in London. Now, I noticed this last time I was back there, and I was like, this just seems a little bit. There just seems too many. I mean, we've got Afghans now, we've got Syrians, we've got Kurds, Turks who have come over the border, as well as Iraqis. You've got many different kinds of Arabs, but don't forget that's on top of the huge Bengali, Bangladeshi communities and the Pakistani communities we already had. And ironically, it sounds crazy to say this, but London probably has more a diverse group of Muslims than Damascus, Baghdad, Islamabad. Do you know what I mean? And this is the result. And in some ways, although we've been going on for quite a while now, it's a complicated situation. Yeah, the Middle East it's another continent. It's it's miles away. It's 8,000 miles away. This is on our doorstep. This is what we're going to have to deal with day in, day out, in some way, in some shape or some form or other. And I don't know how you fix these scenes we're seeing. I don't know what government policy, what legislation comes in. And look at all these Anglos supporting them. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, this is the real story, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't care about Israel-Palestine. I hope they both lose, to be honest. I mean, I wish they could both finish each other off, to be honest. That's the logical end.
I mean, that's the optimal outcome, isn't it? Unfortunately. The top, and that's the thing. I think it could have been Furious Pertinax, or maybe it was Academic Agent on UO this week, said that they, in air quotes, meaning the mostly the media and the powers that be, want you to be emotionally invested in this, and they get really mad when you're not, because then it means that you basically have broken free, right, from the paradigm.
Right, exactly. I mean, the thing is, I said it. I've got so many articles going on at the moment. I was just going through some Morgoth videos, and the Hatchling video, a very famous video he did from a couple of years ago, cropped up, and I was just like, a light bulb went off in my head. And what a lot of these right wingers are doing, especially the UK ones, but Ben Shapiro as well, and also I know he's not conventionally right wing, but Piers Morgan is doing this a lot as well. They're playing the Hatchling. They're pretending that events started on October the 7th, 2023. Well, they didn't. They've been going on. I mean, they predate all of us being born, including Douglas Murray and Shapiro and whatnot. And they're playing a very dishonest game because they're almost saying that the starting line is October 7th. Well, I mean, that's just, that's just
been drone striking the Gaza Strip for years, yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, some of the things, I mean, I've seen, not our circles. I think our guys have done really well. Like you said, AA, Marcus Husbernax, they really nailed the whole propaganda thing. I watched Patrick Casey a few days ago. He did really well as well. He's got a good thing. So I don't need to advertise other channels. Stick to the Longhouse. You're better off
No,
there.
we're all about friends here. Yeah.
But yeah, it's. I mean, that's another issue as well. But I mean, I just it's hard to know where to sort of where to draw the line. But yeah, you're right. I put that quote up. From AA, they want you to get emotionally invested in this conflict, and if you're not, they're not happy. And I think, to be honest, what they're doing is they're laying the groundwork they're laying the foundations for the narrative to kind of account for the atrocities that Israel are going to commit, because this is what always happens. Israel hits back.
And Peregrinus here for £2 says fifth gen warfare rearing its ugly head. I mean, that's something we've seen on both sides, is the huge amount of misinformation and sort of groundwork and justification being built up for whatever is to potentially come, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, first they said 40 Palestinian babies 40 Israeli babies were beheaded. Well, that's nonsense. I don't even think there were babies. And I think some people even saying the pictures of the body bags are actually Palestinian ones. But then there's the girl at the music festival who they say they raped and murdered and dragged her through the streets. Well, she's alive. Her parents confirmed it. That's not to diminish what happened to her. It's awful. But and then there's Israel with the white phosphorus, which America used in Vietnam as well. They've used on the border towns with Lebanon. I mean, the propaganda game, the media game is all already on. But the problem is that a lot of these normie cons, not that I mean to bat for the Palestinians, but when there isn't war or intense violence with the media coverage, people think that everything's okay, but that's not the case. Actually, I mean, if you look at the graphs of Israel to Palestinian casualties, it's something like 20 Palestinians for every one Israeli, and these are things that don't tend to make the news. There's that as well. But at the same time, I mean, I'm not coming out to bat. I mean, historically speaking, Palestine has been let down by its leadership time and time and time again. That's another reason why Hamas has kind of taken the reins of power there. I don't have any time for them either, but I was just shocked at what we were seeing in Europe and things. And the problem is that the regime knows that they can manipulate those masses in the West to their own advantage, because normal law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, not people in the DR, not even people who are politically engaged, they will see that and they will not like it. And indirectly, that will lead a lot of them to support Israel. Do you see what I mean? That's the game they're going to play, in my opinion, because nobody wants to see that on their streets. They should do that in their countries, but it's such a complicated game, because that lad mentioned the petrodollar. I mean, America especially meddles in that area way too much. I just want to be a hermit and get back to the countryside, get back to the shires and whatnot, and leave this horrific global globalism. It's not meant to be. People aren't meant to be integrated and in this way. It just doesn't work. Whatever it is, it just leads to chaos and violence and war and displacement. And anyway,
Well, I mean, that's not necessarily something new, but the fact that it can, of course, be psychologically sort of implanted into being at the front of your mind every day for the rest of this year, probably when it's on the other side of the war, is damaging, as well as because of the whole international relations and global politics and geopolitics and the economy of all this. You can't just no one can really just let them fight it out, to be honest, right? You can't just say, okay, well, you're just gonna, we're gonna pull back. We'll be back in 10 years. Whoever is the last man standing is gonna get Israel, right? Exactly. Which would ideally have been the case, 2, 3, 400 years ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on that point, I mean, I have to say, I have to reiterate what a lot of more senior commentators have said. I mean, Israel is, it's a bit pathetic, really. It's a failed state, really. Its situation is really precarious. 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, we were talking about that broader security umbrella and apparatus. Israel needs something like that because, or it needs to normalize relations with with its Arab neighbors. They can't keep on fighting forever because, I mean, that's really all it's doing. Don't forget, there are more Jews. 2/3 of Jews live outside of Israel. Well, the whole point of Israel was to have a country for the Jewish people. Well, a lot of Jews don't want to go there. I've actually, to be honest, being blunt here, I've actually had UK Jews actually tell me that, to their face. And if they do, they kind of go to either Tel Aviv or Haifa. They almost don't go anywhere else because of the security. It's the Zionists and the Orthodox Jews that tend to go in the other surrounding areas and things. And then, of course, there's the very real threat of America's declining geopolitical power, which is a problem for Israel because Israel basically depends on America for its security, for its existence. I mean, the federal government gives Israel more in subsidies than it does many states in the union, for goodness sakes. It's a crazy situation. It's nonsense. And, so what the future holds, I mean, yes, okay, economically, Israel's made a lot of gains and there's a lot of very, innovative, creative industry there. I wouldn't take that away from them in technology and things, but, that only goes so far. I mean, really, at some point, I don't know, the Arabs
could
are a
potentially
mess.
produce those CPUs, right?
Exactly. Now, another thing is, as I've, sorry, one second. Just muted that. I've got a really screechy chair. I don't want to get on the screen. But one thing that is a bit kind of conspiratorial, if you remember at the top of the stream, I said before Luddick came, this Arab coalition has broken down. Well, what's interesting is, Walrus, every country that borders Israel has been destabilized one way or another. Syria's had the civil war, and it's had a lot of groups like ISIS and things get involved. Foreign actors have got involved. Lebanon has just collapsed from within. They've got huge problems with the economy, inflation. They've got a parliamentary crisis. They've got Hezbollah in their ranks. Egypt was undone by the Arab Spring. The Muslim Brotherhood came to power, which is probably actually a worse case scenario than the Egyptian rulers before them. Jordan is the only one that hasn't really suffered an internal revolt, and they're kind of quite secular and they're a bit more liberal by those standards. But that's interesting as well. I don't know, the Arabs never get it together. They just can't. They're incompetent. I'm sorry to say they are. They just can't. I mean, they're inheritors of the world's most precious natural resource, the Gulf states anyway. And the Gulf countries like Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, Oman, they don't want anything to do with them. They don't want anything to do with any of them. They won't. Those countries won't take a single refugee, Muslim or otherwise. So it's a powder keg, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sick and tired of having to process it. I mean, I wish they'd finish each other off. And
the thing is, after watching or doing this show, we don't have to anymore. You can listen to the show, and then you can just, put Israel and Palestine into your ignore list on Twitter, and you don't have to deal with it anymore. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's one guy in particular. I mean, Ben Shapiro, him doing that stupid Hebrew prayer and all this carrying on, and it's just, he's calling for the nuclear.
The chips are down for Shapiro. Yeah.
I mean, and Shapiro and also Piers Morgan, but a lot of the British people the British ones were annoying me as well. Piers Morgan's an absolute. He's a typical hatchling. He is literally. I think he saw that Morgoth video and he's following it bit by bit to a T.
He's like, wow, that's good strategy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is his strategy, and it's just well, that's it really. I just
Should
I mean,
we?
my question just like, what drives Piers Morgan? Do you think he's
I
a
mean-
very kind of interesting character? He's been around for a long
Yeah.
time, and I remember being exposed to him through like some of the conspiratard scene. Like he has this interview with Alex Jones, where Alex Jones just screams at him about like 1776 and guns and whatever. I mean, he was like considered to be like more on the left for a period, and then he had like a small Trump endorsement, and then he's been a bit in sort of center right.
Yeah, he's a great mouthpiece for the regime, and we saw that during the pandemic. I mean, Morgoth has got, I mean, they're a bit old now, but he's got a couple of videos that are really good on Piers Morgan. See, Piers Morgan's very clever, guys, because what he does is, if he has a left-leaning guest on, he pushes a little bit to the right, do you know what I mean, to get some good sound bites, get the atmosphere, get it a little bit heated, but not too heated. But when he gets somebody who's centre right on, he pushes way to the left. He gets out all the platitudes, the Mott and Bailey, do you know what I mean? He uses every last trick in the book. I mean, he's just slime. He's just regime slime is all he is.
He's a journalist through and through.
He's not left, he's not right, he's just scum. He just is. I wish he would. The Americans kicked him out. I wish they'd take him back. But so we got another super chat, I think.
Matty Eyes for $5 says Biden's brother owns property on an island next to a certain famous island in the Virgin Islands. Greatest ally. Hashtag never again.
Right. Well, that's in the Caribbean, right? The Virgin Islands. The UK has islands right next to it, actually. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Hunter Biden was involved, just like he's not involved in the Ukraine thing, and he doesn't have business interests there, and he doesn't have a laptop with.
It's probably not in the black book of Epstein, right?
Well, actually, that's really funny. A friend of mine, just a long-time friend, I hadn't heard from him in a while. He caught some of my streams, and he said to me he thinks all the normie cons are basically, they've either been to Epstein Island and the deep state is threatening them with revealing them, or they're on the payroll. But yeah, I mean, I don't. I mean, it is kind of brutal what's happened to what's happened to the Palestinians. I don't know about the hospital. Was it a rocket from Islamic Jihad? Was it Israel? Was it? We don't know. But I mean, it's. I don't like seeing kids. It's not a political thing. I don't like seeing children attacked. I'm a former teacher. I worked with elementary, primary school kids for many years, and you know, regardless of where they're from, it's sad that they have to get caught up with it. And it's like Peter Hitchens says, he's actually one person from the right who is giving some good commentary. It's actually not a conventional war because it's just civilians that get strafed. You know, will Israel go in on the ground? They might have to get the hostages. That's another interesting issue component to this is the hostages. Israel will either need to negotiate, which they don't like doing, but they end up doing, or they're going to have to go in on the ground in Gaza, and that will mean heavy casualties for everyone. So it's a mess. It's a mess. It's chaos, and it always rebounds on the West. But yeah, I think we do. Well, one good thing is I think we've done a pretty good job, actually, haven't we? We've sort of covered all the. Have you got any other questions or anyone in the chat?
I have something. I have a couple of things that I've saved from chat, so we can go through that, and then I think we'll get out of here. Theo Kerner said a while ago that he will have a mineral water update next week. It's a project that Theo has been working on for I think 2 weeks now. Is grading whether or not Pellegrino is the best mineral water out there compared to other waters. So, looking to hear back from him. We have Call of the Shield Maiden asks, what accent does Nomad have?
I'm a nomad. I've been to so many places. I'm British. I am British. Some people, when I go back to the UK, it switches back to standard Southern British accent. But sometimes, yeah, it's a bit fun. I'm in Singapore now. So, yeah, I don't know. It's I've been around so long now that my accent's kind of been pulled apart. But when I'm in the UK, it's a bit more standard. That's funny on the mineral water. Have you seen that YouTube video and that really posh restaurant in America where they just fill it up with tap water? They bring it to the table and they say to the guy, "Oh, this is Alpine finest, all the minerals and things," and these bourgeois kind of middle class.
Well, I did have a moment when I visited New York for the first time and went to a restaurant, and sort of like the most expensive water you could get bottled was like the Voss water, which is literally, 3 hours drive from where I live.
Well,
it's more or less, the tap water people drink here.
Well, they say the price is going up because of all these stories about microplastics in the water, and you do get like people just come out of the supermarket. All they've got is like mineral water, but I don't know. It's it's another thing we'll have to deal with, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a good stream.
Last one, we have Moose saying, well, maybe not last one. Let's see. My question is, did you see the astroturfing of the female Ben Shapiro? Is anyone attracted to that? Is this about his sister? Or is this referring to something else?
See what it comes.
I'm not sure what that is.
No, that's something. I can't find what that is. No, is he still there?
I don't really know what this is about. I was hoping maybe you knew. So I saved the question.
I can't stand to see him. I just want to punch something when I see him. He's just so... I can't believe when I was a normie-con I used to follow him. But those were...
those were the days. Yeah.
Exactly.
I've never liked him. I never liked the way he speaks. I have never really listened to Ben Shapiro.
People go on that he's so intelligent. I don't think he's so intelligent. He just gets put on. He just broadcasts with normally idiots or half-wits or something. And you go, "Oh, he's so intelligent. He's just super IQ guy." And no, he isn't. He isn't.
Yeah, pretty good. Like the stupid person's idea of a smart person. I think that applies there.
Watching the Big Bang Theory. Yeah. God.
I love
he just speaks fast.
Yeah, he just speaks.
If you speak fast, then you're smart. That's how it works.
Well. Anti-racist thing ever.
Moose for $10 US says, Brett Cooper, take your money. Thank you. Brett Cooper. Who is this? Oh, yeah, she does look like a female Ben Shapiro. Let me bring up the... I have no idea who this woman is.
Daily Wire. She had done the Daily Wire presenter, as it seems that...
She said she was astroturfed, so I don't know. I don't know if she was like boosted for something, or brought up for some reason.
I didn't see.
I see what people mean when they say female Ben Shapiro. You can't unsee that now. Who is Brett Cooper? What have you played in? You have an IMDb profile. Let's see here. She has played in movies. She's a movie star. Well, star, I guess, is a bit of an overstatement. She has something called the comments section. Okay, so she has a podcast called the comments section. So she's even more female Ben Shapiro then, I guess. Her photos are heavily photoshopped. Let's see here.
She's Daily Wire, right? So I see what you mean. She's like a political commentator on the same organization as Ben Shapiro. They've recruited so many people now, right? That they basically have like has like the femme version of himself.
Michaela Peterson has a podcast talking about how she grew and shit. I'm not sure like how she grew up, I guess. Well, I don't have I have enough on my plate to be able to listen to like UO and Distributist and Geo and Prude and those things and Jay Burden. And so I'm not going to add fucking Michaela Peterson to my RSS feed. I'm sorry. I think I literally have better things to listen to.
He's another one that's batting hard for Israel, isn't it, Jordan Peterson? But that's to be.
Oh yeah, he's been going hard on that. But I mean, we knew it was over. I posted that photo of the Pepe looking longingly at Ben Shapiro, Netanyahu, and Peterson having a dinner together. You know, I cleaned my room, but it didn't work.
But I think just to come back around to another serious point, the regime has got a problem on their hands because in the age of the smartphone, the 24-hour news cycle, it's a lot harder for them to run containment on these things. They can't control everything that comes out. So, you know, that's why I think a lot of them are gagging and, you know, they're doubling down and whatnot. But because it's going to happen, we're going to see some horrific.
Peterson specifically just needs to get off Twitter. It's not good for him. He's not handling it well.
I don't follow him actually. Yeah, he's one person
I'm not sure if I follow him either, but people keep reposting photos of his responses to stuff, so that's how I see it. All right. Well, we've been streaming for 1 hour and 45 minutes. I think it's time to end the stream here. Thank you so much, Dissident Nomad, for coming on. This was a very good overview.
Thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure, and it's pretty good. I seem to always come on the week after you have a really funny, really humorous stream, and then I come on. It's really serious geopolitics.
No, it's good. You have to balance it out.
We'll have to. Yeah, I'll have to sing or something. No, you'll lose your channel.
Yeah. Maybe we'll invite you on one time when we have one of those more relaxed streams.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When the world isn't blowing up and war.
Maybe before the next current thing, if we can get to the moment in between the things, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because I think in theory there's like a week at the beginning of October, right, where the Ukraine thing has sort of died down. The current thing hasn't really started yet, so yeah. Glow in the Dark for $2 right at the end here before we leave says, "Embrace third column Crusader States revival." Thank you so much. And with that, we wish you a good night, a good weekend, and we'll see you again next week. I saw on Twitter now as we were streaming that Guide to Culture, Frody has released the lineup for the Decameron Film Festival. Me and Ludwig will be appearing there at some point to talk about the movie Amadeus from 1980 something, 3? I don't quite remember.
I thought it was Barbie. You sure? Joking.
Well, we're not going to talk about Barbie. I don't know if you're going to talk about Barbie.
No. That's pretty good. You made it on, actually. Yeah,
I should talk about Barbie. No, I haven't seen Barbie actually. So
I've seen Barbie. I think that would be a good episode actually. But now we have another great movie. So
we have to be serious, unfortunately. Yeah. No, but Amadeus is it's one of my favorite movies, and I really enjoy it. So that's going to be good to talk about.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Do you want to tell people anything? Do the shilling, any social links?
I put my Substack in the thing. I think I'm going to be on with Lambda soon, talking about the dollar at some point. And yeah, just follow me on Twitter, my Substack as well, and Praxarchy as well, because we've just relaunched the new version. It looks really good. I don't know, it surpassed my expectations anyway. It really is, really looks and feels very good, very intuitive. So the guys have really countless hours behind the scenes and some real heroes there. Escalations.
It is looking very good, and it's for those of you who don't know, it's sort of been restructured so that it basically aggregates a lot of the dissident right content that is being produced on various Substacks and all over the place really, and basically dumps it in here so you have one place you can go and read it.
Very handy.
Of course, some things that are if things are locked behind paywalls, you're obviously not going to find that here. I don't know if there's anything in the works to be able to do something like that, but that would be cool in
not,
the future.
Not currently,
too.
but that might be in the future. So yeah, if people want to, you can just sign up, and that's free, and you can get the newsletter if you want.
Oh yeah,
so I
that's
recommend
very good
people
too.
go and do that. So it's praxarchy.com. So yeah, check it out.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next week. Until then, have a good night and a good weekend. Bye-bye.